I was at work a couple days later. The daily grind had gotten the better of me and I needed to unplug. I jumped on the internet to look for something to read. This is something that I often did at work and even at home. It is quite easy to find free PDFs on the internet of famous and many not so famous books that can be downloaded and read. I'm not a book reader per se, but I have read hundreds of books in this manner, simply downloading them from the internet and reading them 10 minutes here and there. On that day, I managed to find a short story written by a very famous author. It caught my eye because the title matched the title of a song that I recalled from a rock band that I listened to when I was young. I couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection between the story and the song. The story was not very long, which is why I guess they call it a short story. It followed the adventures of a single person who goes on a killing spree during a wintry night in a small town in New England. The interesting part of the story was that he was accompanied on this spree by a female companion who may or may not have even existed. Sorry, I did not mean to ruin the story for you. I bring it up here not to discuss the content, but rather to discuss the writing style, or rather what I perceived of the writing style, right or wrong. The author was writing from the first-person view. It was not particularly elegant or proper. Rather, it was written as if the author was speaking to the reader, telling a story as if they were talking over beers in a bar or on the train commuting to work. Again, not being much of a reader, I did not know that you could write like that. I thought that writing in such a manner would not be acceptable. I thought that you could only write using proper English. I was glad to see that I was wrong. In fact, it got me thinking about what Britt had told me. I could certainly tell stories, and if I was not bound by being proper, it might actually be fun. I was excited about the prospect of writing something fun and interesting that others might appreciate. But then the obvious question was, what to write about? It was at that moment that I recalled an incident that occurred when I was much younger. An incident that I had only recently recalled. I opened a new Word document and started writing. As I stated previously, when I was a child, the church was a large part of my life. I had a very healthy fear of the Lord and was perfectly content to take a great deal of what I did not understand on faith alone. I very easily accepted the fact that there was a great deal beyond what I could perceive and comprehend. As a teenager, I found myself becoming interested in the occult. My faith already provided me with a foundation to be open to the unseen, but somehow failed to properly scare me away from the darker aspects of such things. I sought out as much as I could find on the subject and eventually found an interesting book in my school library that purported to be a primer in magic. The text specifically claimed to provide theory and practical instruction on the practice of ritual magic. Shortly after I became aware of the book, I stole it from the library. I know that sounds awful, but I felt that I had no choice. I had made the mistake of telling a friend of mine who shared my interest in the occult about the book, and I was concerned that if I did not steal it myself, he would. In any event, I took the book home and began to study it and experiment with its contents. The book read very much like a school textbook. The initial chapters simply laid a theoretical foundation upon which the following chapters built upon. There was an explanation of magic and how it was discovered. There was a setting forth of rules and practical explanation of why things were the way they were, and how these principles influence the world that we all know and experience. Following this introduction, the book instructed the reader on how to perform simple exercises that would prepare them for later, more elaborate undertakings. The next sections involved simple charms and invocations that were designed to invoke various innocuous results and give the student a taste of what was to come. After some preliminary dabbling with limited and possibly even imagined results, I skipped ahead. I was looking for something more substantial to satisfy my curiosity. After further study, I became convinced that the book, perhaps inadvertently, offered a plausible method to summon a demon. Yes, an actual demon. Now I freely admit that it was not expressly presented as such, but enough instruction was provided that it seemed to me that anyone of reasonable intelligence would be able to connect the necessary dots and use the knowledge contained in the book to conjure one of these creatures into physical form. Furthermore, the book suggested that, once conjured, the entity might be pressed into some type of service for the conjurer. The concept intrigued me. Not the part about getting the thing to do something for you, but rather bringing it into physical form. Almost all organized religions accept the existence, or something like them, but who had ever seen one? To bring something like a demon into physical form would be truly something amazing. How could I not give it a try? I studied the necessary ritual, practiced the incantations, crafted my instruments, and gathered the necessary material for the procedure. The process itself was no simple matter, and took several weeks to properly prepare for it. The instructions required the gathering and manufacture of some very specific materials. The location and time needed to be exact, and even my instruments needed to be crafted with particular care, not only in their form and material, but timing and intention as well. Over the next few weeks, I busied myself with learning the mechanics of the ritual. As I focused on the actual performance of the task, I started to consider what exactly I was intending to accomplish. Honestly, I was so excited by the prospect of doing the thing that I had not given much thought as to what to do if my experiment was successful. One cannot simply say, I wish to see a demon, and have one appear. First, you must determine which you would like to call. Or actually, it is more correct to say that you must determine who you wish to call upon. Apparently, there are literally thousands of named demons and devils that may be called upon, each unique entity with its own purpose, power, and personality. Although all are dangerous, demons are, by definition, creatures of chaos bent on breaking down all semblances of law and order, using the most horrific means possible. But some are more dangerous than others. If I was able to actually pull one of these creatures here, what was I to do with it? It simply would not do to go through all of this, bring the creature here, and tell it I was just trying to see if I could do it. In the same token, I had no intention of attempting this feat to press some otherworldly entity into my service. The intention was simply to validate a belief in the unseen that we all share. I saw this as a means to prove what I thought I knew to be true all along. However, I would imagine that if I told this to the thing, he would be none too happy to discover his summoning was nothing more than an experiment conducted by a boy to prove to himself that his newfound friend actually existed. I decided that I would ask the thing for some mundane piece of information and then simply dismiss it. I did not want to keep it too long or make too burdensome a request and risk angering it. Demons, the book said, are vicious creatures, and I imagined that an angry one would be more so. It was decided my interaction with it would be brief and as innocuous as possible. After weeks of preparation, I finally decided to go through with my attempt. A friend of mine, coincidentally the same one I was worried would steal the book, was going to stay over my house for the night. At the appointed hour, of course the darkest hour of the night, we planned to sneak from my house and over to the neighboring churchyard. The book indicated that such a place and time would have magical significance, which would add to the possibility of our success. The church was both a church and a school, and as such had a large parking and playground area. We selected a location in the back of the parking lot area of the school, in which they stored their school buses. The buses themselves shielded us from external light, like the building's flood lamps and lights from the nearby streets. They also helped to conceal our activities from anyone who might be passing by at that late hour, which was of course unlikely, as we specifically chose to make our attempt during a weeknight so as to lessen the chances of our being interrupted or discovered. As the appointed hour approached, I left my home alone to make the proper preparations for the ritual. I followed the book's instructions as closely as I could. I located the compass points and oriented my instruments and the altar as prescribed. I then began drawing the various mystical symbols and seals upon the hard ground in plain chalk, copying the best I could from the book. Finally, I drew the protective magic circle around the whole area, careful not to close the circle just yet. I had to be able to go out, collect my companion from the house, and return to the protection of the circle. If I had closed the circle too early and then crossed it when I left to return, its protection would be ruined, and it would have been useless against whatever might come later. So after completing my setup, I returned to my house to retrieve my friend. He was asleep, so I woke him. He was very sleepy and not at all excited about the task at hand. I persuaded him to return with me to the churchyard, with the promise that the ritual would not take long and we could return home soon. For now, however, I needed him to bear witness to what I was about to do, and to serve as an extra set of eyes for me as I conducted my experiment. In my studies, I read an account of a magician who attempted a similar ritual during the time of the Renaissance in Italy. The tale told of a man who wanted to be reunited with a past lover. An acquaintance of his, the magician, said that he might be able to help and proposed summoning a demon to assist. Together, they were able to call some weak creature from the abyss, and it advised them that although he could not help, as he was too weak of a thing, if they conjured others, greater creatures, they might be able to assist the pair in their purpose. The two met to try again sometime later. This time they brought with them several companions to assist, including a small boy. Apparently, it was at that time believed that young people possessed a greater affinity for the spiritual world. Perhaps it was believed that they were more sensitive to such things. It was believed that the boys' mere presence in the circle would assist their party's communications with the creatures they intended to summon. In any event, they attempted the ritual in, of all places, the Colosseum in Rome. This time, the ritual was much more elaborate and time-consuming than the first time. The perfumes and the incense that were used were much more exotic and expensive than before. The additional effort and expense was to aid in the calling of more powerful entities to assist the conjurers in their quest. Before long, the arena began to fill with a multitude of demons and devils. It appeared that the conjurer had indeed been successful in calling more powerful creatures, leaders of their own kind, who brought with them the hordes they commanded. As the place filled to overflowing with this ghastly collection of evil, the party became fearful. They were concerned, and rightly so, that the magician would lose control and they would fall victim to those they had summoned. The magician tried to calm and control the situation and bade the man to ask his favor of those assembled. The man did as he was instructed and made his request to be reunited with his lost love. The creatures responded that the man would indeed be reunited with her at a designated time and place in the future.